Shalom, shalom. I'm here with Rabbi Dov Linzer, who is the President and Rosh HaYeshiva of Yeshivat Chovevei Torah, a rabbinical school and Jewish learning center that I was privileged to learn at for many years.
And gets micha from.
And Rav Linzer is a posek in the field, a religious authority in the field, not only for individuals around the world, but also for hundreds of rabbis out in the field. And so I want to ask you, what is this we're doing when we're asking a question? What is this you're doing when you're giving an answer? Is this just about a conclusion, or is there something kind of deeper than just, the answer, the conclusion?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question, because I think that a lot of people think that halacha is really just about rule following, and that, when you're asking the halacha question, it's just tell me the bottom line. And what people, I think, are mostly hoping is that the answer will be one that is true to halacha and sensitive to their condition. Sadly, sometimes poskim give answers that really don't fully appreciate the human condition. But at the end, people think it's a lot about rule following. And I think that people that aren't brought into the halachic system and don't lead a halachic lives would think it would be absurd for me to look at halacha, study halacha, because I'm not playing by those rules. What do I have to learn from it? And I think that that's a real failure, because I think that, if we believe that the mitzvot, as we do, are not arbitrary, and that there are values that are communicated by, and the reasons that we live a life of Torah and mitzvos, then also hopefully halacha is in a way that instantiates, embodies the values of the system. And I think if a posek is being thoughtful about it, giving a halachic answer can be much more than just giving a bottom line. It could actually be a type of a religious guidance. Do you want an example?
Yeah, that's a good example. Yeah.
So I think that I'll give you the following case. Someone asked me about, should I have my relationship with my mother is it's an abusive relationship that I have with her. It's emotionally abusive. Every time I get on the phone, she makes me feel like garbage. It injures my soul. I have to be in years of therapy, but I know that I have this obligation of honoring my parents. Kibbud av v'aim. So, but my therapist and people are telling me I have to set boundaries. I can't really engage her, but do I still have to go ahead and engage her because of my obligation? And here you have three types of answers to this question I've seen. I would say you have the wrong answer, you have the right answer for the wrong reason, and you have the right answer for the right reason. Okay? So the wrong answer are the poskim who will say, the halachic authorities who will say, nope, I'm sorry, the obligation of honoring your parents is such a big obligation, and the Torah and the Gemara, the Talmud tell stories of these heroic acts people would do to honor their parents, so even though it's this so damaging to you, you still have to do it. That's the wrong answer, because that's maybe true to the halacha, but certainly not true to the human condition. Then you have the right answer for the wrong reason. Understands that the human condition here requires, no, that's what you need to do, you got to set boundaries. But what's the halachic justification? So one answer I've seen is people will say, well, you don't have to honor your parents if they are wicked, if they're Rishoyim. So your mother is a Rasha, a wicked person, and you don't have to honor. And I think that is horrific, because I think there are wicked people in the world, but I think, people are complex. You can have abusive relationships and this person is not wicked, right? And I don't think we want to be in the business of designating and deciding who's wicked and who's not wicked. And what's also important is, it doesn't speak to the realities this person is dealing with. It's it gives me an answer, but it's not seeing my reality and my situation. The right answer for the right reason is that, yes, you have an obligation to your parents, but ethical obligations in Judaism, you have stronger obligations the stronger connection you have to someone. And your strongest obligation is to yourself, meaning not your needs, everything you want comes before what you have to do for others. But if you're endangered, you have to protect yourself before you worry about others. And whether what you're protecting is your property or your physical body or your emotional well-being, that is your prior ethical obligation. So, and that is very well established within halakha.
So on a moral level, not only is it person-centered and human-centered, it's also pastorally, if someone feels valued
exactly
and cared about and being addressed, not just morally that's a Russia, right? So I think that's very powerful.
And when I tell this to people, you see this weight go off their shoulders. Because I haven't just told them what they needed to hear, which is like, you should not be calling your mother if that's what you need to do to protect yourself. I have seen their reality and made them feel not like I'm cheating, I should be doing this for my parents, but I found it out not to. They actually can appreciate why it's the right thing to be taking care of themselves, right? It's not
and it's empowering because someone feels that I am the one who needs to know what I need.
Right.
So somebody's not going to tell me what I need. I have to figure out my wellness.
Right.
In all of this. So
that becomes religious guidance, right? And not just rule following.
Right. So I think a lot of people think about halakhic questions, and of course this is a huge part of it, as ritual-based. Ben Adam l'makom instead of Ben Adam l'chavero. Like, I have a Shabbos question, I've got a Pesach question, I've got a fasting question, very important. Right. But there's many ethical dilemmas in our lives.
Yeah.
And what are some of the and people talk about that halakha is very black and white, but ethics are very gray. And of course it's different than that, or it's more complicated than that. But I wonder, what are some of the most common ethical questions you're kind of engaged with? And when it's in the realm of ethics instead of just ritual, do you think it's more gray in some sense?
Right. Well, I think this case we just discussed is a purely ethics case, right? Responsibility to parents, responsibility to self. Right. You know, another area that halacha speaks a lot about, which is also sort of connects to this point about religious guidance, is end-of-life issues. Right? People are totally tortured about what to do end of life. And by the way, for anybody who's watching and listening, I have to make a plug and say, like, make sure you have written a living will and then a healthcare proxy, because the worst thing that happens is when a parent is, an end-of-life situation, and then the siblings are fighting about whether to put them off on life, excuse me, I'm losing my words, on life support, taking them off life support, and then even if there's not a fight among them, if there's not clear directive from the parents to the kids will often feel so guilty that they made this decision, and they'll carry it. So people should really, I don't care how young you are or how old you are, everybody needs to do that. It is a blessing for the next generation. That's my plug. Back to this. I've gotten questions from people, which is like, my mother is on life support. She's, she's like, will never recover, has few days left to live. I want to take her off, but I will feel that I'm killing my mother. What should I do? And I don't want to talk about like the specific technical halachic issues, but here's another place where I draw on the logic of the halachic system, because when the halacha sort of discusses this issue about withdrawing care, withholding care, and so on, a key principle in halacha is you are not allowed to hasten a death. That is true, but you also are not. Meaning you cannot. Excuse me. Let me say that again. You are not allowed to shorten a life, but you also are not allowed to stand in the way and delay somebody's dying. If somebody is dying, you have to let them die. And the phrase used in some of the poskim is, this person is suffering, their soul wants to depart. You can't keep the soul in the body when it wants to depart. I have never heard like somebody who gives a halachic answer draw on that language, but that's there in the system. So when I tell somebody, this person says, I know I will have killed my mother if I take her off of life support. What I say is, the halacha says you cannot, if somebody is dying, you have to let them die. And the biggest chesed, kindness that you can do for your mother now, her soul is waiting to depart. And the biggest kindness you can do is to let the soul depart. So I think it just, again, I see this weight come off of people's shoulders. I don't know if that was the type of thing you had in
very
mind.
interesting. So I'm tangentially, how do you think about applying Torah ethics in halachic decision making when there's not really a precedent to do it necessarily? It's clearly in the ethos of Torah, but there's not a precedent to use this in this complicated situation. How do you think about that?
Do you have a particular idea in mind? Or you think about
not necessarily, but I think that that let's say you're asked a question and there's not a chance to research it, or it's kind of a case, and you have an ethical hunch.
Right. So I think that you do wind up intuiting a lot of the values of the system. I will tell you that Something I think that halacha is very good at, which maybe, in the world of yeshivas doesn't get discussed a lot because it's not always conceptually interesting. But halacha understands the messiness of our lives. And it understands that we often live in a world of conflicting obligations. So, for example, the case we started with, I have an obligation to my mother, I have an obligation to myself, right? Halacha is really good at telling you, you have to have a priority of your responsibilities and figure that out. If it's between Shabbat and saving a life is more important. If it's between A and B, what happens when our values conflict? Ideally, we want to find a way that we can satisfy all of our values. But sometimes hard choices have to be made. And halacha is geared to saying, yes, we recognize things are in conflict, and you have to figure out what those priorities are, what those hierarchies are.
Okay, last question for you. And you already touched on this already, but right now, halacha is ghettoized. It's reserved for the frum. Right? And I think halacha should be for Am Yisrael. Right? That the Jewish people can be united around Torah.
Right.
And how do we give a sense, if someone says, I think there's God, but I'm not sure, Torah Messinai, where's the Torah originate from? I'm not so sure. I'm traditional, but I don't know I'm totally committed to this whole system. How do we give a sense that halakhic learning, halakhic, approaching a posek, that this can be something for everyone?
Right, so I think there are probably two stages to this. Meaning, there's one which is like a life of Torah and mitzvahs, right? And that can give people things. I believe that it's from God that we're commanded and so on, but I certainly recognize so many people do not. But still, many people find what it gives them in terms of community, structure, meaning, belonging. Shabbat, it's a way to unplug, all of those things. And it's not just you're doing it yourself, you're doing this part of a people. We're so lonely nowadays. We want membership, we want belonging. So Torah is a way of engaging in our wisdom, and we want direction, we want inspiration. There's so much to say about a life of Torah and mitzvot, and even if you can't do it fully, doing it partially, right? There's no question, and and a lot of people have made those choices and do understand that it's more than just a sense of commandedness and believing in the commandedness. Halacha is a more nitty-gritty, and nitty-gritty is not the right word, but like nuts and bolts type of a thing. It gets into the messiness of life. It's not just keeping Shabbos. It's really thinking about these types of difficult questions, if they're ritual ones or if they're ethical ones. And I think the more that we talk about the values that the halachic process embodies, the more people appreciate, halacha actually talks about conflicting obligations. Halacha talks about my priorities in giving. I'll give you one more example, right? You do so much. I'm so in awe of you, and I'm so inspired by you about all of the work you do, the social justice work you do in the broader community, the work you do within the Jewish community. So many people, they don't think about it. Charity asks them for money, they give a check. They're not really thinking about where are their priorities, what matters more. Halacha is saying, look, there's a couple things you have to look about. You have to ask yourself, first of all, who do you have a stronger connection to? Because it's actually true. The people we're closer to, are the people we're more obligated to. Sort of think globally, act locally. But it also says, where's the greater need, right? And and that's also something. And you need to be thinking about different forms, different senses of need and connection. And those should be guiding you when you're thinking about your tzedakah, when you're, about your acts, about your social justice. Beautiful. So the more we realize that halacha really deals with the messiness of our lives and makes us thoughtful about it and helps us prioritize and give direction, the more I think people can really gain from being
Love it, friends. Let's end on that beautiful point that part of being a Jew is cultivating kavanot, intentionality. Not just donate the next person who asks us, but really think, what are my values, my priorities, and getting into the messiness, the depth of what we're doing here in the world and how to live a good life in service of God and of humanity. Please follow Yeshivat Chovevei Torah and Rabbi Dov Linzer's teachings. Thank you so much.
Thank you.